And I'm turning on the recorder.
Apparently, that was my last thing I thought. And I was like, I don't know whose job it was. And just sit in the chairs.
It's on now. Just FYI, if anyone is saying anything controversial, the recorder's on. All right. So how did you enjoy the readings? 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, and it's like the meat of everything, right? But that's correct. That was a hidden question. What do we usually do at the beginning? Is start with a spiritual mind treatment. And there is one presence, one essence, one spirit that is in and among everything. And I know that it is in the sunset this evening and in the sky that shines still upon us now, and it will be in the stars and the moonlight as we go forward this evening. I know that this presence is in everything, is the creative force behind everything, and it is in me now. It is me as I stand and speak. And I know that it is in each and every one of us here this evening. I know that the peace and love of the God that is within is in all of us and expresses in delight and happiness and love as we go forward in our communication this evening. And I feel so blessed. I am so grateful for the people who come here and who share of themselves and share their thoughts and their feelings with the others in this group. I feel blessed, I am grateful, and I know that as I release this to the words of love that is acted upon and that we are, and so it is. Yes, ma'am.
I had some fun to share. Remember when Barbara was talking about, Reverend Barbara was talking about the T-shirts and how our consciousness is being revealed to all of the world.
Are you speaking of on Sunday or when?
On Sunday. She was
Okay.
speaking a couple of Sundays ago. I was watching a bunch of reruns of Numbers, because I don't always like them too much on rabbit ears. And Professor Feinhardt said, real science is the discovery of the truths that are already there.
Right. He's quoting Troward. Or Barbara. So what strikes you about that? What
It's
surprised
exactly
you?
what, there is nothing new. It's just our awareness is expanding to evolving to recognize it.
Right. And we see it everywhere, which kind of goes back to our conversation that we ended with almost, was are we vanguards or outliers, right? Because that's exactly where I wanted to start. So it's almost like a plant. You're a perfect segue into it. Because if there's already the principle and the prototype is already out there, which is the word that he uses frequently in these last 3 chapters, then we're only building on what's already been in existence, right? Going back to the original prototype, then it has to be everywhere. It's the recognition of it that may not be everywhere. But that recognition actually pops up in TV, and it pops up in music, and it pops up in every major religion. So we're not an outlier. We are the vanguard. We are the movement. And we're speaking louder than some of the others, but hey, that's cool, right? Don't you think? I think it's cool. Anyway, so thank you for that. So any other thoughts on the readings that we've had? No? None? This was such a chock full thing, and I'm going to go off camera and check the temperature. How's it going? So, all right, I'm back now, because I've been instructed about my off-camera presence. So the first thing that strikes me about the reading then is the objective versus the subjective. And what do people feel about that? The objective versus subjective? Yes?
So on chapter 4, paragraph 3, part ways down the paragraph, but not very far, like maybe for the second sentence. He says the subjective mind is only able to reason deductively and not inductively, while the objective mind can do both. And then he goes on to talk about how deductive reasoning is basically you take these two things and you assume they're true, and then you come to a third conclusion, versus inductive reasoning is, are these things that I'm being told true in the first place? And then he went on to talk about, so the important question is, and he had his important question, but to me, the important question that I thought was more important than his questions were, how do we, oh no, I just lost it. It was so important too. How do we get our subjective to only listen to the truths that are being handed to it by the objective and not by things like childhood, which is the big thing that came to my mind when he was talking about all of this, is a lot of the deductive reasoning that our subjective is doing is childhood crap that we were told is true back then, or that we thought was true when we didn't have all of the powers of inductive reasoning in our objective mind because it wasn't formed. Then how do we get that to stop playing a part in our subjective? To me is the bigger question.
Right, right. That's a very good question, I think. And I think, does anyone want to chime in before I start? Go ahead.
So I'm thinking of memory, which is one of the things you spoke about also. The subjective mind sees memory, anything else that's put down there is the same thing as personal. There's no time constraint. So once, if there's a memory that's still responding to a suggestion that you would rather it didn't, you could have a controlling factor in your life today. I think it's wise to go back and see what that is and clear it or remember it.
Right. Right.
So that the impact was really strong for it to be still working in you all this time later. But it was strong for maybe a 6-year-old or whatever. So
Right.
to go back and to revisit it
And just how much information that we gathered as children that was really wrong. Especially, like, even little things, like the other day I was talking to Reagan about a big snow sledding hill that he's gonna have now because he's going to my childhood school this year. And I was like, it was huge, and my friend was like, but really, how big was it? Because it might have not been that big now that you're, older.
Right.
And so, like, just our perception is so off, and so much of our subjective is still being.
Right. But it all has to do with language, again. So we're going to go back to the first class, and then we're going to work our way back up, because we've already talked about some of this. Right? We've talked about the difference in perception. We've talked about how language frames everything that we do. So even that we just said we were taught wrong is a misnomer. It's that we haven't been taught wrong. It's that now we can look at those things and reframe them into a different perspective. And so whether or not the hill is huge to Reagan and small to you, right, is kind of secondary to what his perception is, or what mine is. I tell friends different things all the time, and they look at me like, you're exaggerating. It's like, I might be, but boy, it felt like that to me. And I don't really care what you think was my reality, right? And that's not true, because I cared way too much about what people think, which we all do, even though we would like to say that we don't. We all have self-doubt, and that all goes back to the self-concept, self-awareness stuff that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, right? If we have a really low sense of self-esteem, then that message we continue to give to ourselves that goes into the objective, into the subjective, comes back out as substance, so to speak. I feel like I'm suddenly talking about plumbing. Instead of the teaching symbol, right, of science of mind. And I'm not going to do a nice job of that at all, but so that's exactly what we're talking about. That's exactly where Holmes got his teaching symbol, was from Troward, right? So that's where I go with that. Does that help? We need to reframe. As soon as we become aware of it, it's old news. So every time we continue to tell that story about troubled childhood, we said this also in the first class, we continue to bring those behaviors and thoughts along with us. Every time I say, hi, I'm Kate, I'm an addict alcoholic, that whole life trails along behind me as if it's right here with me today. And is it? I don't know. I guess so. It's framed my whole outlook on life, the 12-step program since 1978 and a little bit before that when I was in and out and in and out. But so yeah, it continues to inform me, but it is the primary? No, because I hope not, because I hope I've reframed because of awareness. Yes, and then Breezy and then Sue.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I really don't talk about my past, is because I don't want to bring it into other people's consciousness, so then they ask me about it and stuff like that. It's just, it seems to me like you're reiterating it and bringing it more to the conscious front where you really don't want it to be.
Right. When do we need to talk about our past? Is there a need that we share with people, like we seek out a practitioner or something? Is there a time when it's important to talk to someone else?
I think when it's interfering with the present and you've done everything that you can think of to move on or leave it in, behind.
Right,
And sometimes you're looking for tools or ideas to try something different.
right. See, and I agree, when it's interfering, and when it's interfering is when we start recognizing some of those old patterns of behavior. Or for me, that's how I know that my past is interfering with my present. When I start sitting around and I'm like, about something, I'm like, really, what is this? What is that? Why am I complaining? Why am I so grumpy? Why am I so tired? Why am I not sleeping? There's something else going on. And if I can't figure it out, I've started seeking out people to talk to. And, Sue and then, I'm sorry. I want to call you Christy, but Chris, yes. I know you're Chris.
You call me anything.
Sue.
Yes, what you just said, I think that, I know for myself, there are times that I know better intellectually, but there's a block somewhere. So I will go to someone that I trust to be on a certain level of thinking. Not someone who's going to commiserate, but someone who's going to bring me into my higher self,
Right.
As much as possible. I think that's good. But that whole memory thing, what you said about it wasn't wrong. So this is something that I was really deeply into for many years. Going back, there's something about gratitude and being thankful for certain things that happened, certain things that you did maybe, again, when you were 6 years old or something, that probably saved your life or saved your sanity in some cases at that time. So it's possible, and you maybe haven't cleared it. So at this point, you don't need it anymore. But there's something to thank in that memory. Not go away, you're bad, you were wrong, but thank you for being there when I was 6. I needed you, you were a great help, I don't need you anymore, but thank you.
Right, so you're bringing up like that concept of self-forgiveness in that sense, yeah? Or no? Is that too broad?
It's not even something that needs to be forgiven,
Okay.
just to be acknowledged that it was a necessary thing and kind of whatever happened when it did.
I think that's a good
And you don't need it now.
Okay, Chris?
Well, I agree. It's, something that you acknowledge it and you let it go. But a lot of times what happens is, the speaking about it sometimes is very cathartic. You know, if you don't talk about it, then it can be pushed down and tamped down, and then you kind of come to a place where you blow up and you don't really know what to do about it, where do you go with it, and then it becomes a problem. So sometimes we need to discuss it or to talk about it, or as you said, Sue, is to be able to have someone mentor you through it, so that the next time when that situation or that subject comes up, it's less of a threat, less of a situation that becomes, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, why did I talk about that again? I don't want people to, and there's nothing to say about breezy. I mean, I think it's, you know, we all have our own way in which we deal with things, but for myself in particular, I feel sometimes it's a necessity because of where I am.
Right, I agree. Well, I agree with all of that, right? I think it's important to talk about it until we come to terms with what it is, the piece of it that's informing us. And then, because we can only work with, right, if we want to control what we produce, we have to control the input. And if we cannot, or if we're still having trouble with what we're inputting, then we need to talk about it until we can wrap our head around it and go, oh, that's what that is. That's where it's affecting my self-concept, my self-awareness, my self-esteem, so that you can come back around and say you have a sense of self-efficacy. I'm going to keep going on that because I believe that to be true. If you don't, then we can talk about it so that my sense of volition is clear, right? Because again, I can make a decision and go off on multiple paths. It doesn't mean they're the best choices for me at this time. Doesn't matter. But if I'm clear, my choices will be clear, right? They'll be divinely guided if I'm clear. They're divinely guided if I'm not clear, unfortunately. Sometimes. Watch my language. Yes.
But can't you also use memories to bring up a positive for a positive reinforcement? Say somebody has brought you up a feeling of doubt of your self-worth. Wouldn't that be like a good time to maybe bring up a memory of where you received praise in your past for exceptional work, such as, you know, maybe there was a term paper you turned in once and the teacher really was like, you did a lot of good research here, you did a lot of good things, but, you know, where the teacher sat down and praised you on a good paper, and then here you're facing a situation where somebody's attacking you, or you feel as if they're bringing up your self-doubt, to go to a positive memory.
Right.
And use those memories, use the positive memories in place of when you were.
I think so. I totally think so. I think that our culture is more programmed to the negative to the positive. So we tend to focus on the negative, even here, like let's not think about the negative, you know, but I absolutely, you know, tell stories to my classes at college that kind of have that element of like distress to them, but the truth is that they're really good stories, you know, and they make a good point to the students, and they make me feel good telling them, and I think that's the key, right? If I told those stories from a different point of view, we talked about this last week too, didn't we, with regard to something, we can tell the same story from 2 points of view, didn't we talk about that in here? Yeah, a little bit, I think we did. Or maybe it was the week before. Like, I can tell the same story, that, you know, I'm a high school dropout, I you know, got in through the back door, I got my GED when I was 17 because of this Army sergeant, and the story goes on, and then I got in and I was actually in a remedial math class, right? And this is the story I tell my students. I was in a remedial math class, it was like math 89 or something like that, and the teacher gave us a test back and mine was covered in red. And I started sobbing. I was probably 21 at that time, and I was crying, and I was just like, I knew it. I was so stupid. I knew it. I couldn't get anything. And high school dropout, I'd been told my whole life I wasn't worth it. And the teacher came up and she put her hand on my shoulder and she said my name. They used to call me Bobby back then. And then she said, Bobby, what's the matter? And I was like, I don't know. I was sobbing, and I couldn't hardly get it out. And she was like, just breathe. Just breathe. And she goes, okay, what? And I was like, I'll never understand this. And she said, look in the upper right corner. And I looked and it said 100% A+, but it was in red. And all I saw was red, literally. And it was an A. And I know that there was a moment there that I was like, I did understand it. I could get it. I wasn't totally worthless. And I'm not stupid. And that's true for so many people, right? There are these things that have defined us, and then there are these things that change our perception of who we are, and allows us in some ways to go forward, right? And that was one of those defining moments for me. And you know, and now I teach those very classes, you know. I love it, I do, and hallelujah, right? But the truth is, here's the point of that, is that my story is no different than anyone else's. It's not harder, it's not more challenging, it's not more adventurous because I skydive. It's, you know, it's that everybody's life has got their elements of perception. And that's what is important, is this point of perception. And if we can change our perception and control our input, then we control the output. And that's exactly what the teaching symbol, and this is why it's so valuable to Science of Mind, is because this is pre-SOM, right? This is pre-Holmes. That's what I'm so excited about that, because that means it was around, it was before Troward somewhere, because Troward took it and worked on it and refined it. Because that's exactly what he says. We take these principles, we refine them, we start with nothing, next thing we know, we're flying airplanes. Next thing we know, we have silly people jumping out of them having so much fun, right? Who would have thought when the Wright brothers took off that they'd be people skydiving for pure enjoyment? No one, right? No one. I don't believe anyone was like, I wish they would fly a plane so that I could jump out of it with a silk parachute, you know? I don't think that they thought that during the Wright brothers time frame. It's something that we've built on, and there'll be something even more than that, right? And that's what we're doing, is refining us. We're that microcosm. Yes?
In refining, it's that as you tell the story, that story begins to change, as you stated. And we have the ability to tell our story any way we want to. And I remember myself, I had 20 years at home, and I've spent the last 40 years changing that 19 years or 20 years that I was at home. So, it used to be my story was, oh my gosh, my father was such an alcoholic, and he was such a mean person, and this and that and the other. And now my story is, when I was a little girl, I used to sit with my dad when I had my tonsils out, and he bought me Chinese checkers, and we played for hours, and he bought me chocolate ice cream, and so it went from this kind of stuff to really fun, nice, loving, caring things. But it's the same childhood.
Right.
But I see it differently.
Exactly.
So I've changed, over the last 40 years, I've changed my story from that negative to the more positive.
Right. And what happens when we do that is that when we encounter other situations, we don't view them in the same way. The input becomes different. Right? So, that. Did anyone else want to share on this point before we talk about it? Oh, and then, you had your hand up as well.
Kind of what she said. You use the word control the input, and I think more like filtering the input to get rid of the negative.
Okay.
Seeing it differently. Because I had a dad like that, and I try and remember when he spent hours working on my feet when I was having trouble with him, rather than the only place I could find him is drinking at his girlfriend's house, It's kind of better for me if I remember the good parts of what we did.
Right. That's a good point. The filtering the input to control the output, or are we filtering the output too? I think we kind of filter the output too. I don't know. Depends on who we're talking to at any given time. Selena? And then Dennis, did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
About this objective and subjective mind,
the thing that when I first was starting into metaphysics, I thought I was having to control my thinking and, you know, not let any negative thinking come into my mind, to my subjective mind. But I found that just gave that negative more power. So I just learned to recognize it rather than trying to control it. Just recognizing it and saying, I'm not going to go there, and replacing it with a better thought. That's the way it's worked for me. I mean, the subjective is going to take whatever goes into it. It has to do whatever you tell it to. It doesn't have the reasoning to say, okay, this is right or this is wrong. It has to bring about whatever you put into your subjective mind. So that's why it's important, but trying to control it with my objective mind just did not work. It just gave it more power, just gave the negative more power.
Okay, I think that's a real good point. I will take that and say controlling maybe is one of those, you know, patriarchal, can I say patriarchal? It sounds my patriarchal words that we use that is so encompassing but not necessarily accurate. Right, so that's both of you, filtering and changing the story. Well done. Good. Yes. Tom, Ginny and then Thomas? Oh no, Dennis. Dennis, Ginny and then Thomas. We'll get y'all.
The things we've been blessed to experience in our lives. And you know, when I was younger and thought I was immortal and bulletproof, probably that's what brought me through everything, you know, because that's our attitude. And, you know, that's a good thing. I mean, you know, we do things that seem foolish, but we survive. And I found when we think back on things we've come through, we can be very grateful for all those experiences. And I found so many times in my life that I've run into, you know, people that are experiencing many of the same things that you know we've gone through, and that's a great thing because you can express and experience such spiritual empathy there. And, yeah, and what you said, Chris, and we have these little things, and it just hit me this week. You know, mine was how do you put this truth into action? How do you put it into action? And as I was reading the readings this week, is you allow it. You allow the truth in action in your life.
Right.
And you plant a seed and don't mess with it, you know.
I think that's a really good point, that we allow it, yeah, which again is different from control, right?
I went from saying, calling things problems to challenges, and I was using challenges not too long ago, and my friend Nina says they're opportunities. And I thought, well, that's right, that's better.
This friend here?
Yeah. And then there's, I went from control to managing. I like the word manage, because that's what you're doing really, and it's, you're awake and aware, but it's some kind of a simpler, easier term and idea.
Okay. Management, filtering, allow. Thomas?
I think for me, more recently, it's been awareness, that me being aware, not necessarily controlling the thoughts, although that might be part of it, but being aware of the thoughts that I'm thinking and aware of the emotions that are coming up, because there's a being who is that, call it superconscious or the divine presence that can see all that. And that's what sometimes I just kind of back up into that. And yet there is that, sometimes it's going down a negative path. Maybe use affirmation or maybe use something else, but then kind of probably coming back to the awareness and there's a peace and a balance in that awareness aspect.
There's a peace in what?
Peace and just peace and balance.
Oh, peace and balance and awareness. Okay. Yes. That's why you were my mentor. Yes.
Every time I think of something that to me is negative, it's gotten over the years where I immediately realize there's no such thing as a negative.
Okay.
This is leading to something better. And that didn't come just overnight. It didn't for me anyway. And I can relate that to, for example, my granddad served as an excellent bad example for a lot of things. And you can learn from bad examples. And sometimes you can learn easier. And also, I've found that anytime I'm feeling something is negative, it's something that's attacking my sense of worthiness, or my sense of being loved.
Right.
I always go back to the fact that every one of us wake up each morning wondering if there's anybody on this whole planet that loves us.
Right.
And hopefully during the day we find somebody or something that reminds us that we are loved. And I end a lot of my communications, emails, that sort of thing, with remember that you are loved. That is my salutation, or what, always forget which is which, but
Right.
I get it right in an email. But, to me, that's one of the toughest things to learn, is that there's no such thing as something negative.
Right.
Even losing my gate key, and not being able to get in or out of my property for, 2 days.
Right.
I crawled over the gate and walked home, but, that was inconvenient. What did I learn from that?
I know.
Not a hell of a lot. But, yeah, that's, you make 3 keys and,
Right.
I'll never lose it.
And we talked about that last week too, that even though I'd lost the keys to my car, I had this wonderful day at work, right? Because even though I had been crying and called in and said, I think I'm losing it, and they gave me the day off. And I went in, because then I found my keys, you gentlemen weren't here, I found my keys and I went in and they'd already canceled my classes, and it was just, so now I was at work and I was like, Yes, I'm not supposed to teach today. So we had wonderful conversations with folks. Anything else on this point, and before we move on just a little bit? Because Dennis, I'm going to use you as a segue, because in my notes, before the break today, I wanted to talk about your bookmarks. And if you remember, if anyone needs a new one, I have more blank pieces of green here. But without actually sharing what you wrote, would you, maybe we may need to get some more, let's just pass those back. Without actually sharing what you've written, has it been impactful for you to read it every day or to look at it? Has stuff changed? Has something changed, or the circumstances changed for you? Would you like to share that? If you can, I mean, if you want to. Anybody? A lot of people nodded, but no one, yes. Tell us your name again. B. You're B, okay.
I'm absolutely flabbergasted because, all my life, the issue has been what you said last week about my self-worth. And, I've done what all of us have done, counseling and this and that, and reading, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't until last week it wasn't just the charts and the teaching, but I think it's this whole room, and the energy, and I finally actually really feel worthy. It is just, it's unbelievable. And I can't put it in words. I can't say that it makes, how it makes me feel or anything, but I know now that I'm worthy. It's just amazing, so, you know, it's everything, it's taken all these years, so nothing is everybody else said. Everything in my past was good, because it led me to today. And in looking at it that way, all the garbage just goes away. And if it comes back, I just remember this new feeling in my life.
Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I'm glad you took the garbage and planted something beautiful with it.
Thank you. Good compost.
Some people start down, they sit down.
Well, the truth is, our lives are self-sustaining that way, right? If you want to look at it in terms of our ecological movement and recycling, that's exactly it. We're self-sustaining that way. If we continue to look at the past, reframe it, and go forward, then that's the same concept that we've been talking about. Reframing, 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 right? Thank you, Bea. Who else would like to say? Yeah, Margaret.
I found that reading it, somehow with Troward or Outlook or something, but I feel differently. I feel more confident in that it's a process and not worrying about the outcome that's gonna happen. It's just allowing it to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's different from me.
What do you mean that's different for you?
Well, instead of worrying or wondering.
Oh, that's different for
That's
you.
different. It's the allowing process.
Oh, I thought you said, but that's different for me.
For me,
like
it's
that. Right, I know what you're saying. It's just the emphasis. We're doing one of those weird bypassing things.
It feels different. It
Yes.
feels more confident, more, that it's happening and that it is happening. I'm not doing it. It is happening. The
Right.
creative process of the universe and the law of growth.
Right, right. I'm gonna use that as a real quick segue. Are you all familiar with the term bypassing? Is anyone in here familiar with that term? You are. I'm gonna,
I don't know what
no, I'm gonna go through it really quick, because in Science of Mind, I have found this so many times. It's called bypassing, and in communication, what happens is that our frame of reference dictates almost what we say, because that's what we've been taught. And so the output that comes out of our mouth is what we've been taught and built into our frame of reference by life experiences, everything. And so what happens is, and it happens a lot regionally, is that people use either the same word and that has a different meaning, or they are saying something the same meaning, but it's actually a different word. And so, and people go, no, this is what I said, and you say, no, you said this, and they go, no, I said this, and it, oh, I think it means the same thing, and the other person still goes, yeah, no, it doesn't mean the same thing. And like that just happened with Margaret and I on a really small level, just because of emphasis on two different words. I thought she was saying, I'm different, and what she was saying, if I'm correct, you were saying that if for you, that process has changed, and now that's different. And that's an example of bypassing, where the terms are different, but we're thinking of two different things. And in Science of Mind, this has happened to me a lot, because we all come from so many different backgrounds. Barbara and I bypass frequently on just small things, and it's kind of funny, because I know we're talking about the same thing, and we're like, and she'll say something and I'll say something, and we're like, we're the same thing. I know we are. And so it's that, but it's bypassing. But if my self-worth was low and someone questioned me, right, then I would allow that to filter in, and that would end up controlling my output. And maybe I'm angry, maybe I just get hurt and I go away, right, without saying, what is it that you're really saying? Because I think it's just bypassing. It's the difference between calling it a vacuum cleaner and a sweeper. Has anyone heard of it as a sweeper before?
Yeah.
People from the Midwest and people in the South are like, what? No. The first time I heard sweeper, was in Texas, and I was told by someone, they said, get the sweeper out of the closet for me, and I went over there and there was like a vacuum cleaner in a broom. So I grabbed the broom, right? And they're like, no, it's that. You silly person.
A vacuum has a motor and a sweeper does not have a motor.
Right, there you go.
What's that?
A vacuum has a motor and a sweeper does not have a motor.
I'm not getting into that. I've been in that argument with a person in Texas, and I think I lost.
It's like the word toboggan.
Toboggan.
To me, toboggan is something you put on your head. So somebody else, it's something you ride down in the snow.
2 or more people on a wooden sled down a hill. So those are the things that can cause problems in communication. And those are the things that Troward experienced working with indigenous people in India when he was dealing with so many languages and so many subcultures that they were having so many issues in the history that we talked about on that first day. That's what informed Troward, but he never called it bypassing. That's a more common term now. But that's how it all evolves. And now that we know that, are there any questions? No, is there something else that someone want to share about your bookmarks? Yes.
I think it's really funny to put something big and mildly scary on my bookmark and then promptly lost it. And you just said green bookmarks, and I was like, oh, I wonder what happened to that. So I just think that's really interesting.
It could be, yeah.
But
Because subconsciously we
yeah,
create that
my subconscious
result,
is like,
right?
oh, we don't, that's scary. We'll just
Right.
use that.
Did anyone look at their bookmark after the first night and you've reworded it?
I want a new one because I want to change what I want.
I think that I'm out of little green sheets of paper, but I can get you one at the break. All right? I'll get you a green sheet of paper at the break, because I think that's important for the class that we use, that we're consistent with that, okay? So have you changed the wording since that first night?
Change the whole thing.
You changed the whole thing.
Mine
Can-
completely disappeared.
What do you mean yours completely
Well, what I
disappeared?
had on my list was,
Oh,
nothing is
have you
applicable anymore.
taken it off
It's
so
completely
that,
off my list.
no, have you taken it off your bookmark
Yes,
and written a new one?
there's gonna be a new one.
Okay.
This just happened this evening.
Okay, because that's what we're going to do right now before the break, actually. That was on my plan of action here. Dennis led me to the segue, so this is it. I would like you to take a real look at your bookmark. And what did you write down on the first night that you would like to see different or manifested for you? And again, it's not something that we're sharing up here overall, except how it's impacted our lives. And has it happened for you? Troward again believed in repetition until proven, right? And that very scientific mind in some ways. And so if you see it every day and you're reading the book and it comes up in meditation or prayer or treatment, then that much quicker, right? Things begin to happen as we're more receptive. It starts producing. I'm going to have to change the plumbing analogy. Is there anyone who would like to say anything about that before you actually look at it and change it?
Well, can you add to it, or do you just?
You can reframe it because the more we learn, the more we might have a different language. Or not, right?
But I mean, is this a thing where it's just one thing you want on there, or?
It's up to you, Brucey.
Okay, so
Whatever
it is-
you want.
Okay, I didn't know if you had stipulations.
Does anyone else want to share? Then let's just take a moment and look at that. I'll run upstairs and then
I'll
we
take
can
one.
talk about it briefly.
Yeah, I'll take one too.
Okay, and then we'll break after I come back.
Do you know where the paper is?
Yes, and I know where the paper is too, in the same room.
And the cutter.
The paper and the cutter are in the same room.
Oh. I said, do you know where green paper is? I said,
Yes.
I
Oh,
know
I
where
thought you-
paper is.
Okay,
Hey, so you want us to reword it?
I do, if you need to, if you feel like that would be important, after you take a couple of minutes, you reflect on it. Do you want to reword it? I'll bring you back some clean paper. I'm leaving.
I wasn't here. So what?
Should I pause it? This is my book. Read this.
Some of it reminds me of when it's that's basically
I just noticed that the other day. Something pushing it or something. Whatever they had there, originally was flat.
You taking a nap?
Feels like
We're not actually breaking yet. Just saying.
good.
You want to? Folks, if we could sit back down and just hold the consciousness of this piece, I'll let you break in just a few minutes.
I didn't expect to do these in one.
I don't know, maybe you want to do two, maybe you have two books you want to do. There's extras. If everyone's already done it, I would encourage you to write on a new one and recreate what you want, if you've changed it at all, so that it's new, because you continually recreate, right? Blueprints don't go on the same old blueprints, they create new ones. So create a new blueprint for yourself if you've changed it at all. Any questions? Yes. Would you say your name again, Ms. Law? Pardon? Linda. Okay.
I was just talking to Selena about, once upon a time, it was a thing about doing, what do you call it, a visualization board?
Mm-hmm. A vision board?
Because we learn differently, would for some of us, like Becca was talking about, she wanted to go you wanted to go skydiving or something. If you put that picture on your refrigerator, for instance, of what you wanted to do that you couldn't afford to do, she was talking about skydiving. You were talking about your vacation.
Yeah, the vacation.
But anyway, for some of us, is that a way to keep the consciousness in a positive way?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. I love vision boards.
Vision boards are super.
Yeah, that would be a great project for the end of class if you chose to do a project. That would be wonderful.
Can we talk about the project sometime?
Sure, we can do that this evening too. This is the midpoint, so it doesn't seem like it, but there's only 8 weeks of class, and this is the third class, but the last class will be presentations, I hope, of projects. And so technically, this is the midpoint, the end of the third class, to me, in my mind, right? And we'll talk about stuff too. I know, my way of tracking things is different. Remember, I'm in academia. I'm one of those people. I live by a schedule, and then it changes by an hour, and my whole world is thrown for 2 weeks. So, any other comments? Everyone good? You've got a good bookmark and a good sense of volition about what direction you're going on with this bookmark, because it's all about volition. All right, then let's break and come back at 10:08, please.
I mean, I told you before,
I need to be here, I'm doing my sewing and woodwork and that sort of stuff. Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I mean, you know, sewing and all that sort of stuff. So I've got one.
We're gonna go ahead and get started.
And then another one's that, so I need to do one. Woodwork.
And we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Charlie and I had to dance.
I'm just so tempted to call Jenny out and ask her to find her seat, but I won't. That was a great look. Thank you. Before we go to the questions, I'd like to just start with chapter 5, because I think chapter 5 summed it all up really well, everything that we're talking about. And one of the things that strikes me again is how much Science of Mind has taken from the early teachings of some of these great masters, not only Troward, but Emerson, and all of them were saying the same things. And how they were talking in chapter 5 about the reasoning takes us back again to that concept of, you know, who's the vanguard, who's the outliers, but even more than that, that our subjective is the same subjective universally. If medicine heals, that's race consciousness, right? And so that it's the same subjective, that we're all doing the same thing. We all come to the same race conscious beliefs. I don't know if you can disagree with me, please do so that we can discuss it. We have different input, but what comes out in terms of subjectivity and what actually manifests for us are essentially the same across the board. So my childhood abuse is different from your childhood abuse, but what comes back out in terms of materialization and behavior are low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-love, and that's race consciousness, right? So that, again, going back to what Charlie was saying, is that we're not alone, right? We're just not alone. That feeling, though independent for each people, is the same across the board. The impact is the same across the board. Whether you're hit like this, or someone says a word that insults you, that impact and how it affects our self-esteem and our self-worth is the same across the board. Our behaviors might be more extreme, but those behaviors are dictated through race consciousness. And that's what we're working on changing. That's what we're working on changing. And so if only love comes in, then only love creates in the subconscious and only love comes out. And that's just the ultimate ideal, because we know all there is love. We know that up here. And so the more that we can drop that in every night before you go to bed, to say, I love myself, I love everyone, I love myself, I love everyone, everyone is love. Go to sleep believing love, that's dropping into your subconscious. The manifestation of that, what an amazing day that we can create in this world. Just doing that every night, right? And so, I wanted to make sure that we touched back on that, because the whole purpose of being here is not only Troward, it's actually religious science, right? We're here to understand more about religious science. So our subjective is the same subjective universally. What's in Science of Mind, we call that race consciousness. You're all familiar with the term? You have, because you've all been in other classes. And our individual mind is our personal share of the universal consciousness, right? So some people think that what you believe or what you say or what you walk around telling other people doesn't really impact the world at large. Like what we say here doesn't have any effect in China or Cambodia, but I would disagree. I would say that it does. I would say that every time that we have those moments of like anxiety or anticipation, the way we deal with them affects the consciousness at large. And I don't mean to guilt trip you like you're going to save the world, because we are saving the world already just by being who we are here tonight. But it's that thing that if we work on us, if our individual mind is the individual share in this universal consciousness, and it all drops down into race consciousness, into this manifestation of what we always believe to be true. Certain medicines heal the body. Certain medicines heal the body. Our mind is going, that's going to heal my body. And then down here, we might walk around somewhat healed. And I say that partially because I want to hedge on that, because as we've redefined Western medicine, we know a lot of those medicines don't heal us any longer. And so I still go to the doctor, I still get an eye cream, but in the back of my head, I'm going, I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work. I go to the doctor is the hand of God, you know, all of the things that I've heard here. But somewhere I'm like, I don't believe that anymore. I believe that the true manifestation is in my input, in me, and this is what it still is. It's getting so much better, right? That's exciting to me, that I feel like I'm healing myself, but I'm not only healing myself, there's a whole consciousness out there that's helping me with that. And that's what he's saying in chapter 5, in my understanding of it. And I'm interested to know what other people thought about chapter 5 specifically.
There's the famous quote that nothing is hid.
Only the truth to be revealed. Right, right. That's right. And something else, just one more thing. Troward talks about it as a spiritual prototype, that's our will and that equals our volition, right? And that comes up here. This is our spiritual prototype. And that spiritual prototype, which goes back again to some of the earlier classes, was the cause, right? When we go to that, the spiritual prototype is life. How it manifests is what was created. Back to the mouse and the elephant theory, right? Which I really don't want to go back into, but I keep bringing up. There must be a reason. My own reluctance in that. So, right. So the other thing I wrote down that I just want to say, and if you want me to write some of it on the board, I can. Do you want that, or you're all good with me just gesturing at it? Okay. So the other thing is that if this is the will and the volition, this is reason and deduction, correct? Right? Because we've all had these classes. And then this is only the mere reflection, right? We know that. And I just want to impress that because that's what Troward is saying in chapter 5. And again, he builds on everything in this book. So if we don't have a good grasp of this, going on to 6, 7, and 8 will be that much more challenging by language, unless we have a grasp that this really is a spiritual prototype come down to manifestation. And if we can understand the spiritual prototype. So I've been running around looking at things. The teacher's manual has an example of a little class exercise that has you all in a circle, and by taking one thing and imagining it right down to its spiritual prototype and the reason back of it. And we could do that, but I think that this center, as a teaching center, you're all past that elementary stage. Personally, I believe that about all of you here. And so if you think about anything, if you think about the pen or the ring on your finger or our glasses or the jacket that I'm wearing or the hat on Rick's head, anything has a spiritual prototype that's back of it. And what is the purpose of that spiritual prototype? If you walked it back to the spirit, what is that brought it forth in consciousness as creation? And I'd encourage you to do that over the next week. Really look at things and go, paper, what is that? Your cars. right? If you have a swimming pool, can I, no, I'm joking, or a hot tub, can I come over like that? Because I would like to sit in your hot tub and contemplate its purpose.
For a while.
For a while. But what is the purpose? How did it come to be a hot tub, right? Those kind of things. Can we walk everything back? Everything goes back to a spiritual prototype before it came out and raised consciousness. Everything. Yes, Chris?
I believe that, you know, even go back to the caveman days, that the cavemen knew how to build computers. But we all have that consciousness, we all have that understanding, we all have that knowing, no matter what era it is, but it just wasn't time for us to bring that forth. And that's why the children that are, you know, the young children that are being born are so, they're just so ready. They're being born into the consciousness of being ready for computers and ready for all of the electronic things that they have now. But I believe that way back, as the Big Bang Theory, or however the world was created, that we knew how to do what we're doing today.
Yes.
It just wasn't there for us to bring it forth.
I agree, absolutely. Electricity's already been there, we just learned how to improve on it, on our ability to bring it forth.
And so that's where all inventions come from, hats, paper, cables, whatever, you know, those things were always there in the consciousness, but it just, at that time, is when, as Barbara says, is, you know, we collapse into form.
Right.
And then that form becomes that computer, or that hat, or that blackboard.
Right, but what is it in your life? Why is it floating around in yours now? What's your spiritual prototype for it to have? For Rick's hat, I'm gonna use you again. What's this spiritual prototype for Rick for his hat, on his hat, or for me with this pin, right? Somewhere I created it prior to. And so that's what I'm asking, for your personal life, like your new Prius. Your vacation, I don't know, but whatever it is, look at a few things. Take it back to why you have it in your life in the first place. What's the real purpose? Is it transportation, or is it comfort, or is it safety, or is it financial? And if it's financial, let's back it up, let's back it up. Just keep going back until you feel like you've hit the spiritual prototype. And let's just see what we come up with next week. I think that might be fun. What do you think? Okay. Two people kind of acknowledge that. I'm not assuming that the rest of you are in agreement because of race consciousness. Yes.
So this is kind of off topic, but what you were talking about with the, we had the knowledge way back or whatever, I don't know if any of y'all have done any studying of Greg Braden, but he actually believes that like, there is a moon base on the dark side of the moon, but it's not an alien base. It's from when humans used to have the knowledge and the technology to go to the moon and set up a moon base, and that we used to be, that we're going through these cycles of like more advanced and less advanced cycles like here and now, and that we used to have that knowledge and then we lost it and then we found it again, and it's off topic, but I thought it was interesting. So
I don't think it's off topic.
No.
So you're just proving the existence of Atlantis,
Right,
in
basically.
a way.
And the fact that that the knowledge is all there all the time, it's just whether we're utilizing it or not.
Right. Yes.
When you were talking about how what you think and what you say affects different parts of the world, like it's a vibrational thing, there's no time and there's no geography involved or anything. So what I read once was emotions carry different vibrations. So if you're in a situation, trying to think of okay, let's say your pet is ill and maybe passes or something. How you handle that emotionally, how you handle the situation is going to have a vibrational effect on everyone on the planet who is dealing, will deal, has dealt with that same situation, because it's riding on the same wavelength, the same pattern,
Right.
emotional pattern, vibrationally, and it affects everyone who is dealing with that particular thing. So when you say like about feeling the same thing at the same time, sometimes you find that you'll say something and the person says, like, I was just gonna say that, and, just move to say the same thing. So
Right.
it really is hugely effective or important, whatever you want to call it, to be aware of how you're dealing with situations. It's not just me that's dealing with it, I'm having an effect, whether I like it or not.
Right. Yesterday, I was caught in that tie-up on Interstate 40. I was coming east, I was less than a half mile away from the rig that exploded, that stopped all traffic for 3 hours and a half hours, 3.5 I was sitting there. And, but it started out again as this kind of like, I think Nancy was one of the first people I texted. I was like, explosion on the freeway, smoking. I don't know even exactly what I said. Here I am. I should have taken exit 37. And eventually, we were there. Everyone was out of their cars, right? And people were complaining, I can't believe they can't clear the freeway. I can't believe this. And they should try that. And, people who didn't even see the wreck were like, well, if I was down there, I'd be doing this. Like that. And at first I was like a little like, how do you know? Like that. And I was like, all is well. But then I started talking to people, and we started talking to each other. And then time went by, and someone had gone down there on a bicycle that was on the back of their car. And I was stopping like every other car and saying, they've already, they're lifting it off with a crane. They couldn't touch it because it was so hot, right? The horse got out. There was a horse in the back of a horse trailer. They were able to get the horse out. Everyone is fine, no one was injured, but the freeway was still blocked, even though traffic was starting to go west. We were going east, still blocked, because it was too hot to touch. And they just lifted it off by crane, put it on a flatbed, they're cleaning up the road, we'll be able to go in about 15 or 20 minutes. And we all stood there and we went, oh, like, we didn't want to go. We were all talking, someone had shared cookies, and some trucker took down his cooler and had given us sodas, and it was like, wow, this was amazing, an opportunity to create community. And then several people pulled into McDonald's, which is my exit 44, and as I drove by them, they're all like waving. Bye. Like that. But it's such a small world. Yeah. And then one of those people works at a place that I work at, but I've never actually seen her there because she's not there during my time. And I was like, oh, small world. It's just a small world. And so, but we create that. And so everybody who texted that, right, that experience, that goes out. It used to be we had 6 degrees of separation. This is the point of that. And we don't any longer. That emotion, if we say this sucks in a text and that goes out, then that person has it instantaneously. And we can change that now just by one text. My niece texted me and she said, are you home yet? And I'm like, no. And she says, I'm caught in something up on Beaver Dam Road. And she was up there for an hour while I was on the freeway, and we were like, isn't that funny? Right? And she was like, I don't think it's so funny. I said, I think it's amazing that we're having the same experience in 2 different pieces of the sections of the city, right? So anyway, we can change it now. That's, again, how closely we're connected, our emotional vibration. And it goes to that we have texts and iPad, and we've used electricity in a totally different way than Thomas Edison ever thought possible. Or who's the guy that makes
Tesla?
the Tesla? Yeah. What? Kristen.
I heard from someone, and I didn't actually research this, but he said that at any given moment you have 2,000 conversations going through you because of cell phone waves or whatever. And so all of the energy of all of those conversations is hitting everybody in between the conversation as well.
Right.
On top of the person you're actually talking to. So we're getting all of that vibration as well.
Right.
Which kind of made me
Because
want to
it's all
go
floating through the
be
air.
on a mountain that doesn't have any cell reception.
Part of why I felt like I was on speed.
Yeah, well, he said that's part of the reason why why we're all so, there's so much anxiety and agitation and everybody's so busy all the time is because you, even when you're not having a conversation around anyone, the stuff's all going through you still.
Right, which brings us back to the management, right? Someone said management, filtering and reframing of what comes in, because
Being aware.
what goes out goes everywhere
So
instantaneously.
doesn't everybody put white light around themselves? I don't get it.
Some of us forget to do it until we get to.
That would
I
be
mean, I
nice,
think it's really well
folks.
protected.
That's a very good question. Hopefully we can enlighten that one for each of us.
Well, it was,
Thomas.
I'm glad you shared that because my wife and I were out in traffic and she heard that there's this backup for miles, 40-some miles and
Yeah.
for long hours. And then we said, well, those poor people who are they're blocked up. But then your story of how you got out of your car and then connected with other people and then there's a kind of love fest that makes me think that there's so much, you don't know, unless you think more deeply about something like that, you don't know what the positive things that are happening.
Right.
And the opportunity.
Right, and we weren't the only group,
Yeah.
which was amazing. You could look up and down from where we were, and you could see different clusters of people all over, and it was pretty cool. No one seemed to be, fist fighting or anything. So that was good. Let's look at can I read one thing from the teacher's book, and then we'll go to the questions. And this is kind of a summary of what we're talking about spiritual prototype. If we habitually look on the spiritual prototype as the essential being of the thing, and the material form as the growth of the prototype in outward expression, then we shall see that the initial step to the production of any external fact must be the creation of its spiritual prototype. Right? And that goes back to that it is the creation by your reflection back. Okay, so the prototype, being purely spiritual, can only be formed by the operation of thought. And in order to have substance on the spiritual plane, it must be thought of as actually existing here now. Right? So, back to what do you want? So if you've got something written on that bookmark, what's the spiritual prototype behind it? Because it exists here now. And we're going to realize that. We will realize that. Or maybe will is the wrong word. We are realizing that now. I look at Nina for confirmation. She's nodding. Yes, we realize that now.
There is no time.
There is no time and space, so we realize it, period.
Well, time is a human construct anyway.
That was our first class, huge. Do you want to talk about time and space again? Yeah, Barbara's like, no. Let's talk about the questions. Did anyone have any questions about the questions? One of those questions that stood out to them more than the others. Question, and we can start at the beginning. Yes, Linda.
Maybe it's because of my feeling that writing's not my thing. It says in question number 2, explain deductive and inductive reasoning as it pertains to the two functions of the mind, and I wasn't.
They're talking about the subjective and the objective? Oh,
It's
I'm sorry,
explaining.
so your question is?
What's a concise answer to that question?
Does someone want to give a shot at that before I do? Go ahead.
So the subjective minds can only use deductive reasoning, and the objective mind uses both inductive and deductive reasoning. So the subjective mind can only take what it's given and produce based off of that, and the objective mind can take what it's given and decide whether it's true or not. Basically, right?
That's correct. That's exactly right, yeah.
I'll be here all week.
But you still, does that answer your question? Is that clear?
No.
Do people understand that, the difference, subjective, objective, deductive, inductive? The concept of reasoning behind that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just,
Okay,
The
That was
subjective mind has no, the subjective mind could only take the suggestion that it's given, doesn't have an opinion about it, but just follows the law, the natural law, and deduces what it is. And the objective mind has volition
Volition.
and can induce.
Yeah, that's a good.
that's it exactly. Again, they're both together, right, yeah. Do you have anything else? Anyone? A question on number 2? Okay, then, because those are both right. What did you think about the hypnosis theory?
Oh, I love it.
with some,
Did that help clear things up too? Around subjective and objective?
there's so many good examples, bad examples of, the one that came up for me was bullying. If enough people tell you, you believe it. So, we believe in the opposite, that if I tell you, oh, you're wonderful, and then everybody else tells you you're wonderful, pretty soon you get it, that you're wonderful. But if everybody tells you something negative, you can see the same force on somebody saying, well, then I might as well jump off a roof or,
Right.
Oh, yeah, and that's the reason we have so much
Strike,
issues.
yeah, so to speak.
but if it works so well, and we wanna turn it around, it's really obvious why we need to do that for people.
Right, which is what this whole class has been about.
It's more important to have the internal validation than the external validation.
I think that if you get enough internalized.
I disagree, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
So that eventually it becomes yours though, is that the direction you're thinking? If you get external validation, eventually it becomes yours. Much like my story with getting an A, right? It was external, but it made me, I realized at that time that I was not stupid,
And I feel like
right?
it's
It's important to
external
have that.
is easier to internalize as children because we're more of an open.
Maybe, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe. Okay.
So where I went with the hypnosis thing is if you have a hypnotist that believes that hypnosis works,
Mhm.
and you have a person who has like a physical ailment, and they believe that hypnosis works, then why can't you put them under hypnosis, tell them that they're healed, and then there's no way for them to not be healed, because the hypnotist believes that they're gonna be healed, and they believe they're gonna be healed from the hypnosis. So why don't we just do that?
I don't
I don't know. That's a good question. That's
That's
kind of like Nina's question, why we all don't surround ourselves with white light? That's kind of like one of those questions.
Yeah, I was like,
And the healing,
that's,
Go ahead.
the healing might be a process. It may work immediately,
Right.
but it may be a process for it to manifest.
so manifest.
Yeah.
Right.
Even if it works immediately, I think as soon as you're not under the influence of hypnosis, your basic belief is gonna come back again. And
But
so,
if you have a basic belief that hypnosis works, then eventually won't that override? If you know that you're healed from the hypnosis,
It's
isn't
still,
that gonna override the belief that you're sick?
I don't know, but what I do think is that while it gave us a great conversation into the subjective and the objective, that it's still something external to who we are.
Right.
So back to what Selena is saying is that as soon as you're away from it,
So
right?
it depends on the person.
Has anyone in here quit with the use of Chantix? Yeah. How many of you started smoking again? The two of you. No, not ever? Right. Chantix only suppresses the memory of smoking. And so as soon as you're away from it, you can have changed your whole world, but there's can be something that triggers it and you go, I want a cigarette. And then you have to go back to personal choice. Oh, I haven't had a cigarette in how much time, but I'm not taking Chantix anymore. And my last thought was, where's my Chantix? Because, like that, because it was like, oh, it's time for a cigarette. And I haven't had a cigarette in months, and it's like, but it's the Chantix, it's like that. As soon as we're away from it, and any question of doubt comes in. So if we don't have it internalized, then it's back to this. Whatever we put in out of our self-concept, self-awareness, self-worth, is what it gets mirrored back. Yeah.
It's kind of like, you come to the center on Sunday, you have a great talk, you have great fellowship with your family, you feel like $1 million. Monday morning hits. Well, sometimes you get away from it,
Yes.
and there you are.
And there you are. And then what?
And then you have to really, you have to go read something, you need to do affirmations, you don't have to, but, you have to bring yourself back to that place.
Right.
It's like if you do a quick fix to try to get rid of something or to try to shift something,
That's it.
and it's it's not getting there, it's why you're supposed to learn something from this, I think.
Right. So again, it goes to the spiritual prototype, right?
Yeah.
Right, and how do people
Processing,
maintain
like
their
what we're
spiritual prototype? Meditation, reading, affirmation?
It's a practice.
It's a practice. Right.
And when you're feeling, I don't think I'm gonna go to the center today, that's when you really need to go.
Right,
You know, I mean,
right. It's true, I agree. Are we done with hypnosis? Can we move on? Do you want to? Okay, what about, well, we just kind of talked about number 3 too, help us healing our bodies, emotions, and relationships. We talked about universal subjective mind and its connection to the individual, which was question number 4. We really didn't cover like the absolute and the relative.
That was my favorite.
That was your favorite part of the book. Tell us why.
Because it just explained things that were like up for, well, wait a minute, that doesn't work, and, it's coming up with exceptions to the rule and so on. But the fact that the absolute sees itself as just within itself,
Yeah.
needing nothing else, it just is with a capital I. And the relative needs things to bounce off, things to compare to, things to, but the absolute is, it's just like spirit, and that's how I think of God and atomic intelligence and everything. It is. It means nothing, it just is.
Right. You said with a capital I?
Is.
Oh, is with a capital I, not absolute with, okay. I'm sorry. I was like,
How do you spell?
absolute. I could put in I, and I was like, okay, it's good. I agree. I think that was an exciting piece for me. What about other people? The absolute and the relative. That stand out for you? Yeah, B.
the relative, I said, Lady, what came to me was anything that's relative is anything that's in relationship. So anything in my life that is in relationship to something is a relative. The absolute is no relationship to anything. It just is, as you were saying. But just having that anchor, relative meaning in relationship versus oneness. And that takes you right out of form up into the prototype.
That's a really good, insightful way to say that, I think. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And the absolute is the cause, where the relative is the effect.
It's the way.
The cause.
Oh, the cause.
The original cause, whatever.
Right.
And the rest is all effects, but it all stems from that.
Right.
I was gonna say seed, but it's the thing behind the seed.
It's the thought. It's an absolute, right. Right. Anyone else on absolute and relative? Okay. Then it goes to this thing, how do we control unfavorable conditions? Did anyone want to answer that? I don't really, Selena?
By having a spiritual prototype and speaking our word and believing it is already done.
And yes, I agree. Could we keep going back to that original cause there? Anyone else have something? How do you, this is what you were talking about too? Yeah, yeah, Ginny.
Well, I like this phrase, planting seeds, because I understand that, I've thought of it for a long time. That whatever you're planting a seed, it's not gonna sprout instantly. It has to grow in two directions, down and up, but it will grow.
Right.
And you do have to keep nurturing seeds. And that's the practice, I think, of moving a new idea to you or to your subconscious, moving that idea out, and so that you have space for a new one to come in.
Okay. Yeah? Anyone else? Anyone want to mention what your spiritual practice is, if you have something you do daily that you'd like to share with anybody that works for you? No? Mine comes still from, what was that woman, what's her name, August Gold. When Breezy so confidently volunteered me as the example that night. Were any of you in the room that night? And Breezy goes, she's got an issue, she'd like to. And August asked me what my spiritual practice was, and I said, oh, I pray and I meditate, and she was like, yeah, but what do you do, what do you do the first thing you get up? And I was like, oh, I answer emails or I look on my cell phone. And she was like, yeah, that just doesn't work. And then what do you do? And so she walked me through my whole morning, and in the end I was like, and I meditate, and I read and meditate, and she goes, that's not a spiritual practice. No, because I fill my mind already with nonsense, essentially, before I get to it. And so all of that's running through my mind, like we're kind of talking about. I've already placed Facebook in my subconscious. And she believes August, this is August, how I interpret August Gold. And so my impression was after she talked to me on the break, because she took me aside and was like, she was to start with the implanting of spiritual prototype from the very beginning, and read, write, and meditate. And I still do it ever since her thing here. I read, write, and meditate for essentially equal amounts of times every morning, and it changed my life from the moment I started it that next morning. And she had told me on the break, email me after a month and tell me if it's made a difference or not. But only email me if you've done it. Because if you haven't done it, like, I don't want to hear from you type of thing. Why talk to me again if you're not doing it?
Well, aren't you glad I picked on you?
I'm grateful for the opportunity to grow. But anyway, that's my spiritual practice, and I know everyone has different ones, but if no one wants to share yours,
I'm
that's
still
fine.
doing Mae McCarthy's daily CSO letter.
I don't know. Mae McCarthy?
She's the Summer Prosperity Series book.
Oh,
The Path to Wealth book.
yeah, I did that for her. That's essentially, it's kind
It's
of
the same thing. Read, write your letter of gratitude, meditate on it. It's the same thing. Apparently, I'm starting mine out with Facebook also, because I do Facebook in like child's pose for about 45 minutes while I try to get myself out of bed.
I fall back into it and then I have to climb back out of it. Yes.
Never underestimate the power of just a brief affirmation.
I agree.
Affirmations save my bacon at least twice a day.
Saved your bacon?
Save my bacon, keeping me from going to a place I
That's
don't
a
need to go.
southern phrase, like stove up?
It's like they save your ass.
Save your ass.
I get it. I get this context. I've never heard it before. I'm sorry.
I've
If
never
you're vegan,
heard
it's save my tomato.
What?
stove up.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
friend of mine said that recently. She's often here, but she's not here
I'll
tonight.
clarify for you later.
And she was like saying, oh yeah, I was just stove up and I couldn't, and she goes, and I was like, what does that mean? Like, what are you saying to me? And it means that she was just rigid, like she couldn't get any word out. That's what it means for her. I just dove up.
Yeah, block is a very it's kind of a block thing.
That sounds like bypassing me.
It does, it is exactly that. It's one of those regional dialect terms that can cause confusion with someone from Minnesota.
No. It's more like the chimney's blocked.
Let's regroup real quick, because we only have a few more minutes.
Say something.
Who would like to say something?
Actually, I just want to go back to the how to control unfavorable conditions. When I'm in a situation where I'm starting to feel a lot of negative, quote unquote, unfavorable energies around me, I do what Nina mentioned. I surround myself with white light. That's how I try to control them, because if I know once I surround myself, take the time to ground and surround and imagine white light coming up and in and through me, I know that what I then am feeling is either mine or belonging to the outside race consciousness. And that's how I try to control unfavorable conditions.
So we can only control us.
Right. Right.
And that's how I also, the frequency is coming in. I know the conversation coming through all this, it doesn't get through my white light if it's not from me.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? These are great. Thank you. And thank you. For me, I have a hard time with bubbles of light. Like, I don't do that. I have a hard time getting myself encased in a bubble, like around my tent, or if I'm backpacking or something. I actually don't know what it is I do, but it feels like it comes from the inside. Sometimes, it's that, for me, do you know that, what is it, the man that, my whole mind is.
Doctor Who?
No. Doctor Who, yes, let's use Doctor Who,
Okay.
when he's doing his regeneration. Because that's what it feels like to me, like it comes from the inside and it just shoots out of every part of my body, right?
What
I was
color is it?
actually thinking of Rembrandt's.
What color is it?
Oh, it's white, light, yellow, gold,
Mine's gold, mine's not white though.
like that.
So it doesn't have a boundary. So-
No, but it dissipates everything in its path, any fear that's
Then
creeping
you're doing
in.
it too, you're doing it.
Yes, but it's not a protective bubble in that sense.
But it clears the way.
But it does clear the way. Yep, so it's the same thing,
It's the same
just a
thing.
different form and sense. Yeah, but essence is the same,
Yes.
yes.
Well, in order for us to visually see our science of mind symbol, we have a circle around it.
Right.
So it's the same as the light or the.
Right, but we know that that
whatever.
circle is infinite and it's
You're-
actually a dotted line.
Yeah, you're talking about how your light shoots out and it has no boundary or a border. Neither does the science of mind symbol, but we're only putting that around it because we need to visually see it.
Right, right. But now we see it as a dotted line with a lot coming through it. A lot of input in there. Okay, anything else in relation to it? The physical science demonstrated in relationship to Troward's theory. We talked about electricity. We talked about the concept of plants, seeds germinating into a plant, right? We briefly discussed on that. Chris talked about that as well. What is the law of growth? Which is kind of similar to that. What is the law of growth according to Troward? We talked about that. Anybody want to jump on that?
The only other thing that occurs to me now is
That's chapter 6, I remember.
the planting of the seed or the spiritual prototype, and then just allowing it to grow at its own natural course, take its own natural course,
Right,
rather than manipulate it like it's not fast enough or it's, we'll do it a certain way. So once you put it out there, if you manipulate it, it's probably not gonna happen, you're probably gonna kill it. The way you kill a plant, if you try to force it to grow faster than natural.
which is what Margaret mentioned in terms of healing,
So
right?
exactly, you said, and a lot of people, you'll hear saying, well, I did it and I did it and it didn't work and, you know, so there's like an attitude around that I not only planted it, but I wanted it to grow at the rate that I wanted it to grow at.
Right,
So that's not gonna work. And they think the whole system isn't working, but that's not true.
right, exactly that.
Well, in my analogy, when, as Jenny was talking about, is that the plant grows, the root grows in two different directions. When it grows down to anchor itself, you don't see it.
Right,
But when it comes up, the dirt flies, whether
Right.
it's a crop or whether it's a plant in a pot. That dirt has to move in order for the plant to grow. So many times people see, you know, in a conscious, not conscious thing, that people have these thoughts of, oh my gosh, you know, the dirt is moving and I don't understand it. What is happening? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I bring up these thoughts that I've never thought of before? And it's because that dirt is moving, because the plant has to grow or wants to grow. And if they don't allow that dirt to move, then it dies, because there's nowhere for it to go.
right. That's a great place to, for us to end, I think, today.
So
That
thank
was
you, Jenny.
great.
That's great.
I forget the process, is it a treatment prayer before the blessing, or wait until we get to do
She
the?
just kind of makes a statement and then we pass the thing and then she blesses it.
Okay. Nancy went to get the baskets, something else, and start remembering. Thank you, Nancy. Chris, is it okay if I ask you to close this out? Would you be open to that? Thank you.
As we close this evening, this is an absolute place of peace, knowing that as we have spoken here tonight, that all is well. Knowledge, growth, experience has come forth into this room to bring each and every one that has been here in this space, this knowledge, this love, this joy, as it surrounds us. And I know that this is true space of God. This is God in form, as we are here learning, knowing, accepting, and being. And I'm so grateful for the time that we've had here tonight in this enjoyment of this space, bringing forth the knowledge of our teacher and the knowledge of each student in this class. I am grateful for this love that has engulfed my heart. And I release this true word into living, loving law. And so it is. So it is.
It's just a symbol of reciprocal energy.
And so I thank the universe, I thank each and every one of you for your participation here tonight in that reciprocal flow of energy that you've given us here. It just goes out and multiplies. We are the vanguard, we are the movement in force as the universe comes down through us into this manifestation. Here we are, and here we are. We are one with, and so it is.
Thank you.
You.